The subject of AI art is en vogue. While the explosion of ChatGPT into the mainstream and the threat that tool poses to all the email and copywriting jobs of the world has been dominating the mainstream conversation, image generation tools like Stable Diffusion and Midjourney and the rest of them have become the subject of a lot of conversation in my communities among artists and creatives. Opinions are, as they are about anything, divided, although in the circles where I run, people are generally less than enthusiastic about these tools, at best seeing them as intellectually and spiritually vapid spam engines, and at worst as an existential threat based on theft and abuse. Before I did this YouTube nonsense for a living, I did a different kind of nonsense. I was a mid to low tier independent comic artist and illustrator, making rent by taking commissions and praying that someone would subscribe to my Patreon. For someone who is in the position that I used to be in, AI art tools are, objectively, a direct threat to their livelihoods. The market that forms the basis for the kind of work that I used to do, for the business I used to run, is being directly targeted for destruction. And so is the skilled labor of every mid-level concept and texture artist, every in-betweener on an animation production, every storyboarder, and every artist who makes a living making Twitch emotes and drawing people's D&D characters. Even the usually preternaturally resilient, not safe for work art market is feeling the squeeze, with image generation tools increasingly able to output infinite amounts of instant gratification. AI art tools are designed explicitly to eliminate the cost of labor for all those forms of work. And since no human being can compete with free, in air quotes, those tools are going to drive working artists directly out of business. So, let's talk about AI art. And something I want to say up front is that I'm not very interested in debating whether AI art is art. I am of the if it walks like a duck school of thought, and AI art is, for all practical intents and purposes, art. Right now, we can usually spot it if we pay attention to the telltale signs, but the technology is advancing and we will all fail that Turing test someday. And if our only objection to AI art is that we can tell that it isn't real art, then that objection is going to fall apart the moment the machine can make it look convincing enough. So, AI art is art. The more interesting question is, what kind of art is it? What are the conditions for its production, and what does it do? And I think that in order to talk about those things, we should first very clearly establish that the fact that we all collectively call this stuff AI art is the result of an incredibly successful marketing and branding exercise by the people and companies who stand to get rich from selling the technology. AI art is not made by AI. There is no artificial intelligence involved with any stage of the production process of AI art. Despite what the AI difficulty settings in your favorite video game might have you believe, nobody has ever invented a true artificial intelligence, and certainly nobody is using one to generate big-titty anime waifus with horribly distorted nightmare hands. These tools are not run by artificial intelligences, they are run by machine learning algorithms, and these algorithms are no different in nature than the one that decided to recommend you this YouTube video, no different than the one deciding which ads to show you on every website that you visit, and no different than the algorithm shoveling recommended content into your face on TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter. These algorithms may have different purposes, but they are all made from the same technology. It is important to establish this for a couple of reasons. First of all, because by branding these products as artificial intelligence, the people who seek to profit from them are engaging in what I would essentially call a kind of soft fraud, a blatant false form of advertising. It makes their products sound more sophisticated and futuristic than they really are, and it obscures the reality of what these tools actually do and how they function. And yes, I know plenty of them have been released as open source software, but the people they're trying to sell these things to aren't going to be programmers, they're not going to go through the technical white paper. The second reason it's important is that conceptualizing AI art as artificially intelligent muddies the waters of all conversation about it. Implying that there is an artificial intelligence at play, a mind, opens the conversation to all sorts of philosophical debate about the true nature of consciousness and creativity. How can you say that these machines are not creative? Who are you to define what counts as a real consciousness? It creates a smokescreen of false ethical dilemmas, and it makes people give a leniency to AI art that we would never ever extend to the algorithm shoveling 400 banner ads in our face when we're just trying to read a goddamn article. These machine learning algorithms, in the very simplest of terms, are prediction engines. They are designed to attempt to predict a desired output based on a given input. When you ask ChatGPT to write you an essay, it cycles through an unspeakably complicated series of mathematical calculations to predict, one word after another, what a successful output might look like. It doesn't think about any of those words, it doesn't know what they mean, and it doesn't know what kind of context that they have. All it knows is how to predict mathematically which series of words in a particular order will lead to a satisfactory result for the user. And I bring this up because I want to dismantle a particular argument. I have seen it argued many times that AI image generation tools work in a way that is comparable to the process of human creativity. AI art tools mix up a database of preloaded images to arrive at something new, and isn't that just what we do? Don't humans also mix and match their experiences to produce new outputs? How can you say that it's so different? This argument fundamentally misunderstands how brains work. First of all, the human mind does not run on binary code, but it also completely misunderstands how these machine learning algorithms work. Machine learning tools do not make decisions. They don't think critically, they don't reflect, and they have no awareness of what they are doing. They are simply engines of manipulated probability. If you want a way to visualize these tools, imagine a giant pachinko machine with a vast and impossibly complex network of pegs. These pegs bounce balls back and forth in insanely complex ways until they land in a specified pattern. You as a user can make the balls land in any position and pattern that you want simply by changing how the balls go into the machine. Your prompt decides the output. But at no stage of the process is the machine thinking. It was designed to allow for a huge range of outputs from a huge range of inputs, but the balls don't bounce on the pegs creatively. They just bounce according to math. All of this is to say that AI art is a misnomer. There is no artificial intelligence involved in any stage of this process. I will not entertain credulous philosophical arguments about, but how do you define intelligence? Because I'm not 18 anymore, first of all, and this isn't an intro to philosophy class with a stoned TA who gives you a passing grade just for showing up. These are machine learning tools. They are probability models, and they are not creative in any normal human reasonable sense of that word. But of course, with that established, even though the tools themselves are not creative, surely human beings can still use them in creative ways, right? No, the answer to that question is no. But before we get to that point, let's just step back for a second. I just spent the previous section of the video arguing that AI art tools are not equivalent or even similar to human minds, and thus you can't compare what a machine learning algorithm does to human creativity. But let's assume that I am completely wrong about that. Let's assume that that entire section of the video was nonsense. Let's assume that they are equivalent. When a machine learning algorithm generates an image based on a prompt, it is engaging in the exact same creative process that a human would, and thus its output is equally creative. If this is true, what the hell makes you think that the prompter counts as the artist? When I take a commission from a client, they tell me to various levels of specificity what they want me to draw, and my job is to follow their directions. But when the piece is finished and I deliver it to them, everybody on Earth, from children to copyright lawyers to national governments, universally understand that I am the artist who created the art. The commissioner may have prompted me and told me a lot of the details about what to put in there, but no matter how specific their instructions were, they will never be the artist. So if the creative process of a machine learning algorithm is equivalent to the process of a human, then why should the prompter be credited with anything that it makes? In this scenario, the machine is the artist. In this scenario, the machine is creative. The prompter is merely the commissioner. Even the most arrogant Medici patron of the Renaissance would never have gone around Florence claiming that he's sculpted the statues of Michelangelo just because he asked for them to get made. So, if machine learning algorithms are creative, then AI artists definitely can't be. But of course, I don't really believe that. Machine learning algorithms are not creative. They are, like pencils, brushes, rulers, and paints, merely tools. And all tools can be used creatively, in theory. If we ignore all real-world context, all questions about how the tools were made, how they function, ethics, copyright, the lot of it, then yeah, absolutely. Like many of my fellow artists, I can absolutely see how these things could be useful. You can save a lot of labor with something like that. And if a creative mind applies the tool in a clever way, creativity will result. Unfortunately, we don't live in a world without context. This is not the platonic realm of ideas. This is the dirty, complicated world of reality where things have nuance and circumstances outside the nature of the tool may conspire to render the tool creatively useless. Because here's the problem. AI art tools as they exist today are universally created with stolen labor. And I'm not using that as a legal term. I'm sure some slimeball lawyer in a fancy suit can point to a technicality in some badly written copyright statute from the 1830s that makes it not a crime to steal 100 million pieces of artwork for a database. Somehow, I'm using it as a moral term. The only reason AI art tools work at all is because they have enormous databases of previous art to draw upon. This is the fuel that powers them, and those databases were compiled from millions of images that were used without permission. AI art tools as they currently exist are a means by which you can extract the benefit of millions of man-hours of other people's labor without their permission, without having to pay them, and without adding an ounce of effort yourself. AI art tools at their core cannot create anything new. They are converters. They convert the collected effort and labor of past work into new forms. That past work, those millions of images, those are the fuel. They are the thing that powers the whole operation. Without those images to draw upon, these algorithms cannot produce anything. Without the labor of artists to create training data, there can be no AI tools. Any creativity that is possible with AI art tools is possible due to the creativity of the artists whose work form the basis for the tool's functionality. No training data, no algorithm. Therefore, with the currently available tools, AI artists cannot be creative. No matter how good their ideas, no matter how creative their prompts, the only possible output from a fuel tank of stolen creativity is plagiarism. And I think we generally all agree that plagiarism isn't creativity. Now, even if we were to imagine an AI generation tool based entirely on public domain data, that is, data that isn't stolen from anyone, there are still intrinsic limitations to these machines. As I said, they are converters. The most an AI generation tool can ever do is rearrange the data it has access to into a different pattern based on a prompt. Thus, the absolute highest quality of work it can produce will always be just a little bit less than the quality of what is fed into it. But more importantly, this also means that it inherits every single bias, every single flaw, and every single problem that is present in the training data it is built from. So if, for example, its training data contains a substantial majority of light-skinned characters, the model will always assume that the most likely desired result from a user is lighter skin on the character, because that trait is disproportionately weighted in the data. Some people have already found that even if they ask image generation tools for dark-skinned characters, the tools will make the skin as light as possible because that bias is present in the training data. And this problem extends to everything. Anime art, for example, has a tendency to default to larger eyes for female characters and smaller eyes for male characters. So, if you ask an image generation algorithm trained on anime art for male and female characters, these are the tropes it will reproduce. The end result of those tendencies is homogenization. Image generation tools, simply due to the way they are constructed, will regress towards the lowest common denominator. Always. In simplified terms, whatever is most common is assumed to be most desirable. Whatever is most popular will be most copied. I hope we can all agree that regressing to the lowest common denominator is the opposite of creativity. Creativity is supposed to push and expand the boundaries of human imagination, and image generation tools, by their nature, are designed to produce means and averages. They're designed to copy what already exists. And this isn't a problem that you can solve by simply giving the algorithm more training data. That training data has to come from somewhere, and if the sources of training data have a bias, if they have limitations, if they have problems, it doesn't matter how much of it you feed into the algorithm, those problems will persist always. Those inherent limitations to creativity will exist always. Anyway, we've spoken a lot about creativity in this video so far, but in doing so, I feel like I have been giving these tools a little bit too much credit. The marketing around AI art certainly emphasizes creativity, but that's not really what these tools are for. The purpose of AI art is a lot more practical and a lot more pedestrian, because the truth is, this is a power loom, or an automatic loom. They were first invented around 1785 and are one of the big and iconic creations of the Industrial Revolution. The textile industry, its products and its profits were a major driver of invention and advancement in the production of machinery, and the development of automatic looms formed the basis for many other machine automation projects to come. Weaving was traditionally a very labor-intensive job and a very skilled one. Memorizing the steps and movements necessary to turn wool and fibers into woven cloth was a process of learning that could take a lifetime to truly master, and there were huge deltas in quality and value between the work of a good weaver and the work of a novice. With the introduction of the automatic loom, the quality of work was standardized, and the amount of labor required to turn a given volume of wool into a given volume of cloth plummeted. As a result, not only did weavers and textile workers rapidly lose their jobs, those who were able to retain work working in the new textile factories were subjected to brutal working conditions and heaps of systemic abuse. Factory owners were safe in the knowledge that because tens of thousands of people had been turned out of their jobs, if any worker started complaining, they could simply be fired and replaced by the next starving bastard willing to work for lower pay. In response to these frankly intolerable conditions, workers began to organize and engage in both political activism, petitioning the government for regulations, aid, and legal remedy, and they began to engage in strike actions, breaking into factories and physically destroying the machines that threatened their livelihoods. In England, these striking workers began to call themselves by the name of Luddites. If you know that term today, you know it as a mocking insult that describes a backwards technophobic idiot, an obstinately primitive reactionary who hates science and progress and resents all technology. The real history of the Luddites, though, is a very different thing. The Luddites didn't smash machines because they hated technology. They didn't do it because they were upset about how kids be on their phones nowadays. They did it because the way that factory owners and the wealthy classes used those machines was putting their actual lives at risk. These were people who spent years, almost entire lifetimes, learning to be good at weaving, good at treating textiles, good at doing their craft. They established communities, culture, shared histories, folk songs, and traditions, and the livelihoods and survival of their families was based on the expectation that if they put in the hard work, if they learned a difficult and valuable skill and made that skill available in the market, then they in turn would be rewarded with a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. And then suddenly a machine could do it cheaper, and their human labor, their human craft, their human lives became surplus to requirements. There isn't anything inherently immoral or evil about automation or machinery. They're just tools. But in the hands of capital, these tools were used to destroy communities, to destroy livelihoods, to destroy culture, and destroy traditions. They were used to throw human beings into precarity and poverty for no other reason than some dickhead factory owner wanted to get a little bit rich a little bit faster. Maybe you think that the benefits are worth it in hindsight. Like, yes, a lot of people suffered, but that was temporary, and future generations have now reaped the benefits. It's a valid position to take, and I'm wearing a cheap t-shirt from China too, so I don't exactly have a high horse from which to be sanctimonious about it. There are definitely benefits to having cheap fabric so much more available to so many more people. But if you were there back then, and you saw this process happening in front of you, you saw the desperation and the impoverishment, and you saw this part of society being wiped out in front of you, would you have turned your nose up at that? Would you have said, well, this is going to be worth it in 200 years when people can buy a 5-pack of t-shirts for $20 on Amazon? Or would you maybe have thought, hey, what if we came up with a way to do all of this technological advancement without hurting people? Wouldn't that be better? I bring all of this up because, like the automatic loom before it, AI art is automation. This story has played out before, and we know how it's going to end. As I've said, AI art is a morally neutral tool in and of itself, but so is a hammer until you use it to bash in someone's head. Corporations will use machine art as an excuse to destroy the value of creative labor. They will use it to drive down the cost of production, and they will lay off people by the thousands the moment it is viable to do so. And they will do all of this for no other reason except that some dickhead CEO wants to get a little bit richer, a little bit faster. If you want to imagine the benefits of this new and amazing tool, you also have to remember the people whose livelihoods are going to get crushed by it. People are going to be forced to give up their businesses. They're going to be forced to give up their craft and their dreams. People are going to be thrust into debt because of this. People are going to lose their homes because of this. Not because AI art is evil, but because it creates a set of incentives which the amoral world of business will follow. Genies generally don't go back in their bottles. AI art is here, it comes with a host of problems, and we're gonna have to deal with them. So, what are the solutions? Well, first of all, I don't know. I'm a YouTuber with a history education. I'm not a policy expert or a copyright lawyer. It's gonna take a lot of effort by a lot of smart people to figure this shit out, and whatever solutions are implemented are necessarily going to be imperfect. That's just the way of the world. But if I have to try and give some suggestions, okay. The first and most obvious is for the training data to simply be licensed. The people who want to make these tools can reach out to the human beings whose labor will form the core of the functionality of these tools, and then just pay them fairly for the labor that it took to create them. That would at least make the use and deployment of these tools somewhat ethical. That would at least compensate people for their work and respect their right to consent. The problem, of course, is that under those circumstances, the only entities with the money and IP library to create truly powerful AI art tools are gonna be corporations. Disney, Universal, Fox, Netflix, Tencent, all the companies that already monopolize culture will be granted an even more powerful tool to continue that monopoly. Copyright law is already the personal hobby horse of the Disney Corporation in the United States, and there's no reason to expect that they will abuse the concept of copyright any less once they become able to infinitely replicate the work of every person who has ever worked for them. With robust legislation, they might be made to pay royalties and licensing fees to the artists whose work they exploit, which is better than nothing. But anyone who imagines that these tools will spur the vanguard of some kind of popular revolution of radically free creativity is absolutely dreaming. Broke college students with big ideas and creative hearts are not suddenly going to be taking on Hollywood, because even if those tools theoretically allowed one person to do the creative output of 100 people, any studio could just hire 100 people and get the creative output of 10,000, plus a marketing department, plus an international publishing arm, plus an army of lawyers to crush all competition before it even gets started. These tools will not democratize anything. They aren't magic. They will be subject to the same market forces and the same material conditions that everything else is. If left unregulated, these tools are and will always be based on theft. All of the economic incentives guarantee that they must, and the corporations will be the biggest thieves of all. With regulation, well, they are as vulnerable as everything else is to corporate corruption, but we might have some hope that they don't catastrophically destabilize the entire creative labor force immediately. But, okay, I know I'm generally being very cynical here. Do I see any positive potential in these tools? I can certainly try to. Let's say 100 artists get together in a union, and they all agree to pool their collective work into an image generation tool. Everyone in the union can use the tool to help them work, and thus everyone benefits from the advantage of everyone else's collective labor. That's at least an imaginary idea that I have just pulled out of my ass. It might not be viable in practice, but the point I'm trying to get at is that if these tools have a positive use, then it has to be based on the consent and the mutual benefit of the people whose work gets used to create them. It cannot be based on theft, and it cannot be based on the exploitation of the many for the benefit of the few. And more than anything else, that is what I want you to take away from this video. All of those blue sky promises and tech utopian garbage vomited up by Silicon Valley jackoffs is noise, designed to distract you from a very simple truth. Nothing gets made for free. AI art tools do not summon as if by magic an infinite spring of new creativity. They simply repackage the work of other people and pretend that it came from nothing. They are based on the stolen work of thousands of people who were not asked, did not consent, and have not been paid for the value that they now help to create. OpenAI did not fashion ChatGPT as a naturalistic language chatbot with the sheer magic of programming. They exploited the brutally underpaid manual labor of real workers to filter their language model into a product that they could sell. It is always a mechanical Turk. There is always exploited labor hiding under the table. If we are going to live in a world of AI art and image generation, if we are going to somehow make these tools into a net positive for the world, we must stop thinking of them in the terms sold to us by people who stand to be billionaires if they become normal. We must always ask whose labor was used to build this tool and who can it be used to hurt. Think hard, be compassionate, and have solidarity. The only means we all have to protect ourselves from abuse is the support of the person standing next to us. Anyway, I don't want to advertise anything today. Support the channel if you want to. Please don't get into stupid fights in the comments. And may the tides of history wash gently over us all.